So good morning to all. My name is Katya Tomsha, and I'm glad to introduce you with American hypnotist Dr. Petrocelli. Ask you if you can describe me a process of putting somebody in hypnosis.
Well, we go into different trance states all day long. When you're driving a car, how many times have you driven for hours and you're thinking about a modeling shoot, a boyfriend, something going to school that day, and you don't even realize you passed exit, and you got there, right?
Yeah.
You did the most dangerous function in the universe, because while you're driving, your subconscious is focusing on that car going 60 miles per hour, 2 inches away, the person stopping short in front of you, because the slightest slip up in your subconscious, and you're a roadkill. But you go into trance states when you're reading a book, and it's no longer a book. You're there. You're in the character. If you're a dancer or if you're a musician, you go into that state automatically. We just use the state that you create for learning. Now have you go inside. Have you ever gone to a beach?
Yes.
Can you remember the feeling of the sand against your feet?
Yes.
Was it warm or cold? No, it was sea breeze? Was it salty?
I could.
Could you feel the warmth of the sun on your hand, on your body?
Yeah.
Now, to access those internal states, you had to go inside. Just went into that trance-like state. You have a whole set of interior emotions, just like we have sight, taste, smell. We have internal senses where we can recall a taste, a sense. And that's hypnosis. It's not being in a coma or quacking like a duck.
It's just like feeling normal.
Some people go into trance states. Certain cultures, third world countries, where they go into a really deep trance state because they're conditioned. They believe in voodoo and other things. But for some people, it's the equivalent of if you have a friend who you're talking to and she's reading a book, and you say, Debbie, or to Debbie, and she's focused. That's like focused attention, a deep state of hypnosis. You may have another friend that you call Donna, and she turns right away. Attention span. It's your ability to focus, to cut out those external feelings around you.
English, for example, is not my first language. It will be difficult to put me in hypnosis.
Well, it depends how you think, because people don't realize in the English language, certain words aren't taught in the basic language, like exhale deeply. That's not in the basic translation. I have to listen to their words, however they talk. If I'm saying things in English and you're thinking in another language, it doesn't mean the same. It's just like I speak a little Thai. I may say, go up the block. And they say it, block, go up.
Tell me if hypnosis can actually be a replacement for more traditional practices or medications.
A lot of doctors believe that most illnesses are 80% psychosomatic. Most people claim after a session, I've done more work in this session than I've done in 20 years of therapy. We're working on an outcome. I have to get someplace. I'm not here doing this session just to hear myself talk. It's emotionally draining, and not too many people want to do this work. That's why there's just only a handful of good hypnotherapists. There's a lot of hypnotists out there because anybody can read a piece of paper, but that's the limited extent of their ability. And if you think reading a piece of paper is going to get life-changing results, who are you kidding? Read the piece of paper yourself, save your money. Because when I first started out, that's how I started out. I was up the block for studios, only working with actors. Okay. Self-esteem, expressing anger, I bring up emotions. Self-esteem, performance fears, stage fright,
I read somewhere correctly. You started your practice dealing with actors?
The first commercial people, the first people I charged, our first center was up the block from Robert De Niro's Tribeca Studios. And the story we heard, I had an actress, brand new actress come in. And supposedly she had interviewed with somebody. It could have been Robert De Niro, one of his people down there. My workers was handing out flyers on the street, and they wanted to get rid of her because she was doing such a bad job, such a total mess. And they said, why don't you go up to the hypnotist up the block? And she came in that night, and I worked with her for 4 hours. They come back sometime, or they must have met another lifetime. 2 days later, she came back and auditioned. And the story I was told that the casting people said, where the heck have you been all this time? She said, I was here 2 days ago. You weren't. Yes, I was. That was you. And they looked at her and they said, are you on drugs today? She says, no, I went up the block to the hypnotist like you told me to. And from that point on until we lost the lease in that place, all I worked with was actors, some famous, some struggling, some brand new. And it was a great experience because actors have a lot of screwed up little problems. The reason they have to be in front of the limelight is maybe because they didn't get that attention as a child or to put themselves forward. But there's because all those things that come aboard, self-esteem, stage fright, worthiness issues, and also allowing yourself to be maybe on a set with 40, 50 people. You got to have an intimate moment, and you got to sort of put that aside and just be there.
So how can you actually help them if they have to be naked in like one scene? What do you actually do to help them?
We go through all those early emotions starting at the beginning, from childhood, sometimes from conception, and we change all those incidents where that first feeling came up that held them back. A 60-year-old man come in here, full-blown panic attacks, right? The first time that memory came up, he was 5 years old, lying in bed, the door was closed. He woke up out of sleep and there was a growling sound outside his bedroom door. He shook like a leaf for 3 minutes. 3 minutes later, the door popped open and it was his cousin laughing his head off. Well, now we know how it turned out, right? So I sent his 60-year-old self back. I had him talk to that 5-year-old. If that 5-year-old knew your cousin was going to be outside that door, he could go through it totally different, couldn't he? Let's rewind it like rewinding a video. 3, 2, 1, the scene starts again. But now that child knows you're there by his side, knows he's safe, knows everything you told him, knows his cousin is going to be outside the door. Just like he's been given a new script. 3, 2, 1, what's happening? He's sitting up in bed laughing his head off. Just change at the level you created it. People think it takes 2 textbooks to learn how to become angry. We'd be a better off society if it took that much work. You step off a street corner today and a bicycle messenger runs into you. 2 weeks later, you approach that same street corner, no danger in sight, and that same level of anxiety comes up. And stage fright experience was Radio City Music Hall. 5,500 people was my college commencement speech. And it was 8 o'clock in the morning. Now, if you told me as a kid I was going to talk in front of groups, I'd say, you're nuts. Because I would shake walking to the front of the room. I couldn't do it. And I realized when we traced this all the way back, when I was 5 years old, they did the kindergarten nativity scene play at Christmas time. And 3 days before, they told me I had to be the little drummer boy. So all these kids had elaborate costumes. I go home to my mom, says, Mom, you got to make me a drummer boy's outfit. So she goes behind the bathroom door, takes the terry cloth towel that we wiped the dog's butt with, and she threw it at me, and she says, wear that. Because I don't know what a drummer boy wears. 3 days later, they hand me the drum. I've got the terry cloth towel around my neck that smells of the dog's butt, and I'm shaking like a leaf. From that point on, I couldn't even walk in front of a classroom. The first time those feelings came up, being in front of group. To this day, I talk in front of crowds. I know they're more scared of me than I am of them. I know by asking them a question, just picking them out at random, now I have them all in fear. That was the first time I went through hypnotherapy myself after the World Trade Center incident. It changed a lot of things in my life. Before that, if it wasn't for this work, I wouldn't be here talking to you right now.
What happened at the World Trade Center?
Basically, the morning of 9/11, I heard the first. I thought it was a car crash. I looked out my window. I live at this intersection where you could see both towers. It was on Thompson and Houston Street. So I walked to the subway, coming up out of the subway, and no subway service. I was half a block from the World Trade Center. I had to walk around the building. 5 hours later, and I presume it's when the second plane hit, I found myself covered in soot. My hearing was pretty shot. I couldn't feel any sensation in my body. I had the taste in my mouth. I got up. I saw gray soot all around me. I was like in a fog. It was very ethereal. I looked at all this gray soot and I walked outside. Everything was covered in gray soot. I just stood there for hours. At least that's what I think I did. I have no clue. But for the next few months, I was pretty much a mess. People say go to a psychologist. People said go on drugs. And the reason I got into it is because most of my friends died from drugs before the age of 20. A lot of violent people in my neighborhood, they went to drugs and alcohol. I had a low tolerance, so I didn't drink, I didn't do drugs. But I knew about hypnotherapy, but it was a West Coast phenomenon. There was only a handful of them, and I knew this hypnotherapist was coming to New York, and I called him up, and he said he wanted $700. I said, I'm out of work. I said, but I'm a hypnotist. I'm a good subject. And he said, okay. And he was doing a demonstration for 25 psychologists. And I remember we had agreed I would come up. And I was in the back of the room and he called for a subject. I remember that day a stripper, the top stripper in New York City, exotic dancer, stood up and his eyes lit up and he was all excited. And basically I walked up from the back. I pushed her down in the chair. I jumped up on the chair. I said, sit there. He said, but she stood up first. I said, yeah, but she's not going to kill you if this doesn't work. And he worked on me 2.5 hours in front of this group. And I thought, this is nonsense. The next morning when I woke up, I couldn't bring up any of those feelings from 9/11. But also a lot of the associated memories cleared up too. Talking in front of people, being in front of groups. A lot of things changed in the way I perceived the world. A lot of the fears were gone. All our memories are linked.
After one session?
Hypnotist, I've done a lot of work on myself, but it's limited as far as you can go because the hypnotist is the one with the limitations if it's yourself, if it's self-hypnosis. I was ready. I was at a point in life where I says, this has to work because I had no options. When you get to that, when you don't give yourself options, it's like when, I don't know if it's Magellan or one of them, they burned all the ships and they told people, you have no choice. This is where we are now. When you burn all your bridges, when your family members have walked out on you, when everybody's given up on you, when your relationship is over, there's no place else to go. As long as people have somebody, whether it's an alcoholic and somebody keeping them stuck in there by taking care of them, you can't escape.
So have you been dealing a lot with people of disaster? You did?
After 9/11, we put together groups using the synagogues and churches that I had put together before. I had done a 2-day training for people who are alcoholics to give them some hope. And I called in hypnotists from all over the country. I had a big hypnosis practice group called Sleepwalkers. We used those same connections to work with World Trade Center clients. Now, we did this totally free, totally under the radar, because I knew if I was doing, they'd stop me. You know, because all they want to do is throw money at people, put them on drugs, aren't working on results. It's just like when they took heroin addicts off the street in the village when I was a kid, and they put them on methadone, and 30, 40 years later, they're still on methadone. They didn't have a solution. Got results with people. The results aren't profitable.
At least you're helping.
At least when I go, the day I'm gone, I'll say, at least I did my job here.
People usually have like the same reasons to be afraid of being on stage.
Stage fright, again, is the same thing. We go back to those earlier memories, the first time they felt fear. It could have been a dream as a kid, and they woke up, and the next thing you know, they're in front of people, and that fear just amplifies over time, amplifies over time. It's the same associated memories, the fear. And once we clear up these memories, go back through them with what we know as an adult, so you look at them like no feeling attached. Then getting up in front of people, it's just almost like, hey, you feel comfortable. Mind tries to go back to this scary feeling. They can't find it. It's not there anytime. We're no different than a computer.
Okay. Can you tell me, is stage fright connected to low self-esteem?
It's connected to those memories where someone fronted you or may have said something simple and you feel being judged. Critical parents. My mom does this, and I try with my brother's kids. At 13 years old, they were pretty developed. But she'd say things like, getting a little chubby, that's so cute. And they're at homes like sticking daggers in a doll of her. And 6 months later when she'd come over and she said, oh, you lost some weight. As far as they're concerned, you're still judging me. You're still judging me. I'm judged. And parents do this all the time. Either that or they do it to themselves. And if you're in that environment the first 10 years, that's what you feel. You feel judged. You feel someone's always looking at me. Someone's always judging me. Someone doesn't like me. And even when somebody tells you something good about yourself, you can't accept it because this is still here. It's the same thing with actors. I'm on stage. People are looking at me. A lot of people now. Some actors push themselves through that. A lot of actors, to this day, when I work with stage actors, they tell me, I puke my brains up before I ever go out on that stage. When I'm sick, I go out there, I do a great job. Billy Crystal did the Oscars. His most successful performance, he had 102-degree fever. He was walking backstage, they give him chicken soup, this and that. He said, if I can even get out there, and he gave the best performance because he wasn't worried about his performance. This is all I can give. And he gave way above. Matter of fact, it cemented that job position for the next few years.
Nice. What about a lack of motivation? You can actually solve that problem as well?
Yeah, it's what keeps you from being motivated. If you get what you want, that means you might have to change something. It means you might have to get out of a relationship you've been in for 7 years. I'm going to make this relationship work if it kills me. When the fact is, the most ideal person in the universe could be right there in front of you, waiting for you. And you don't see it because you're going to make this work. Sometimes, for example, I work with young girls who are basically hypochondriacs. Basically, what happens if they get better? Well, then they don't get the attention from mom and dad. And they'll go from one doctor to another to find one that believes that there's something wrong with them. If a doctor says you're feeling good, find someone who agrees with them. They get some sort of secondary benefit. So it's not motivation. It's what's keeping you from being motivated. If I was motivated, I'd have to get off the couch and leave the remote control for a while. If I was in a relationship, well, I'd have to make it work. I'd have to do something. I'd have to listen to someone else. Leave my apartment. Go away from my texting. Maybe have to pick up the phone once in a while. Motivation. That's why you're here in this country. Americans aren't motivated anymore.
Find a reason, lack of motivation. Are you talking to the person who comes?
Through it because they believe there is a reason. They believe we don't really care what the reason is. But the reason doesn't change the behavior. So we go through those earlier memories. So now they look at it like, who cares? Why do you need a reason when you don't care anymore? Once you no longer have that feeling, you don't care about a reason. You don't care about anything. Matter of fact, you don't even think about it again. In nature, we're not always heterosexual. A worm, an earthworm, has both male and female. You know, on a Saturday night, it just curls in a bowl and screws itself. I have a friend who comes here from Greece. He's a little guy. You know, whenever we walk down the block and there's a 350-pound woman in front of him, he says, John, look at those hips, look at those hips. I say, Starkle, step back. Your testosterone is leaking over here. I'll tell you a great story. It's about my friend and brother's friends. This is about 15 years ago. This is a good-looking guy. He's got blonde hair, blue eyes, peaches and cream skin. He's really an attractive guy, but he's as dumb as an ox. And he'd come around us when we were outside and talk about his girlfriend, Sweet Pea. And when he talked about Sweet Pea, his eyes would light up. He'd look up at the heavens, and all the guys would get jealous and say, how could this idiot get a girl like this Sweet Pea? And one day he says to us, he's going to propose to her. So guys didn't care if they're going to show up for this. It was an Italian restaurant in the village. And we're all in this restaurant, about 30 guys, and he's standing at the end of the bar. And all of a sudden we're watching him, and his eyes light up again, and like the heavens opened up. And the door opened up. And this creature, 5 feet in both directions, no neck, comes in. And we just looked. I didn't know if it was male or female or human. But we looked at his face, and his eyes lit up like this, like the sun came up. And we couldn't believe it. Was almost like we weren't seeing what he saw, because he was seeing heaven coming in. We were seeing, we didn't know. Now, months later, when guys would get together and we'd talk about, somebody mentioned Sweet Pea, nobody would talk. We'd just look at each other. We didn't see it. We didn't believe our own eyes. A year later, he was getting married, being in the church, and people came up, the bridesmaids. He came up, there was Sweet Pea, and then there was a person in the back of the room none of us had ever seen before. It was his mother. She was like an older copy of Sweet Pea, 5 feet in both directions. Sweet Pea. I went to visit him a few weeks ago. He moved out to New Jersey. He's got 2 kids. But he looks at his wife just like he did 15 years ago. And you know what? I look at her just the way I did 15 years ago.
Nothing changed.
Is she human? But what we're attracted to, a lot of women come in, they want to fix the things that guys find attractive. And she doesn't feel good about it, but it's the one thing that turns the guy on. And they change it. You know, if a woman goes out and gets these stupendous implants, well, and he grew up and he likes, you know.
Would you get implants or something? The reason has to be somewhere else. It's
a lot of women who've come in and have had implants, all of a sudden, they get all this attention where they never got attention before in their life. But then, those feelings of they're not looking at me, they're looking at this. And they start to hate it. You know, this isn't me. You don't love me for me. People are attracted based on a physical basis. And this is a relationship that doesn't last. Everything turns around. You know, modern caveman, it was the oldest guy, the strongest guy who had the youngest woman. Well, now we got cougars. We got older women who are looking for younger guys. Look how our modern society changes. When people were starving to death in countries, it was the heavy woman that was attractive. But look at Marilyn Monroe. To this day, even gay guys tell me she is. There's something sexual, sensual about her. Our whole presence, that provokes that sexuality, that sense. It's what we're comfortable and familiar with.
Using all these, your suggestions to yourself, do you have a good life? A quality, a life?
You know far more than you would like to. has changed from what it is. They like going to third world countries and going to a little village where you walk in the house, you sit down, you eat, and nobody even asks you where you came from. You know, in different cultures. They like people who still have family. We don't have much family here. People get together and there's no communication, there's no love. And what people call love are simple things. To be there for the person in a relationship. And why the heck did you ever get married? And they got married because you had the right job, you had the right thing. I wasn't to be independent and I'm independent. Well, why come home? No emotional commitment to the other person. Amazing what people will do because of physical attraction, out of sex, or relationships that are, and they'll take it out on themselves another way. Alcoholism. It's amazing. When I run women through these sessions because they want to feel good about leaving their husband or their boyfriend, 6 months later when I'm talking to him on the phone, how's the relationship? Oh, he's okay. We're doing great. But now the child knows you're there. Hasn't done anything different. They changed. You might be coming home every day looking like this. She's open and receptive. This is what this guy is in a relationship. Guys, when I talk to them, the one thing I would love my wife, my girlfriend to do is to pay attention to me. Pay attention to me. They don't even know what job they work. My wife doesn't know what I do for a living for 15 years. I said, that's amazing. That's amazing.
The main cause of troubles that people are experiencing is lack of love.
If we had to boil down everything I do, the number one thing that most people come in here is for a relationship. They want that relationship that Hollywood promised them. You know, where they meet that person and there's a journal that says Hollywood movies in 90 minutes. You know, some other script where these two people who never should have gotten along in life finally get together. They get married. But that's where the relationship starts. This woman told me that they had been forced before they get married to live with the guy for 2 weeks. They said, if I lived with my husband for 2 weeks, I would have never married him. Because they can't hold on to the facade. I don't want the guy who showed up in a suit and tie. I said, the guy who showed up in a suit and tie doesn't exist. The guy who walks around the apartment belching and breaking wind, that's that guy. That was the dog and pony show. The guy doesn't exist. They want this vision. The truth is, we're attracted to however we grow up the first 10 years. And you'll see couples process. That process could take anywhere from a couple hours, depending on a person's age. If they're only 20, it's not too far. But if they're 60, they got 3 times the lifespan. When they're 77, they're just stubborn. Now you're dealing with memory issues as well.
Well, thank you very much for answering all of my questions. I hope that we helped you too. So, have a nice day.